I work with vulnerable people, and it has made me question that with the future supply of vaccines somewhat uncertain, there is a risk that the Australian federal government will follow the UK's lead and attempt to open the economy before we have reached herd immunity. It seems we are already seeing rhetoric compromised individuals should isolate with extreme caution while restrictions are eased. Would such an approach pose a risk to the well-being of immunocompromised Australians, many of whom are already marginalised by mainstream society?
Well, I think the Minister's already anticipated to some degree a lot of the elements in that question. But Astrid, what do you think?
Yes, it does pose a risk. And when we think about who is fully vaccinated in the future, people who aren't fully vaccinated in the future, that's going to be a level of, it's going to prevent certain access, it may prevent them from doing certain things, accessing certain services, going to sport, etc., etc. It risks laying a new layer of marginalisation, a new layer of disadvantaged over what we already had pre-COVID. That was people with disability, that was people who are, like myself, immunocompromised with chronic illness, but it is all other forms of marginalisation as well. We risk almost creating a two-tier or almost a new class system in Australia, including people with chronic illness and disability.
Libby Trickett, I know you had a visceral response to so-called Freedom Day in the UK. It didn't seem so delightful to you. What was your response?
Yeah, it was just... It's just horrific to see that they have just opened up the doors and are basically letting the virus in. I mean, that just seems completely unbelievable that in this day and age that we would care so little about people who, you know, may not be able to be vaccinated or who are vulnerable people in our communities, our older members of the community. That scares me, and it scares me because I think people are really sick of the situation that we're in Australia. They're sick of locking down. They're sick of borders being slammed shut. They're sick of not being able to plan holidays to anywhere outside of their state. And I think that's the really scary thing, because if people tune out and start to look overseas and see everyone opening up, they forget how many people have died to get to this point, and then they're just opening up and even more people will become vulnerable. And I know that with I have 3 young girls, you know, they're not vaccinated right now, and the idea of opening up and potentially creating a situation where a whole new strain that attacks young children or people who are the most vulnerable in our communities, that really scares me.
I know that, like many other Australians, it's been really difficult for you to manage your mental health, and you made a big decision at the beginning of the pandemic and lockdown to take care of yourself in that regard. Can you tell us about that, Libby?
Yeah, so throughout my life I've dealt with all different types of mental illness, including depression and postnatal depression, and through that situation in Brisbane. We've been so lucky in Brisbane. We've had one of the least amount of lockdowns, but when we went into lockdown in March 2020, I knew with a 6-month-old, a 2-year-old and not quite 5-year-old, I should say, that I was going to have to really take care of myself. And I didn't have those things that I normally rely on, which was being able to access my psychologist and being able to exercise regularly in the ways that allow me to manage my mental health. So I made the decision to go on to antidepressant medication, which has been just a lifesaver for me through this uncertain time, through these unprecedented times, I guess you could call them. Yeah. It's been a real benefit for me, and something that I'm very happy that I took the steps to do all the way in March last year. But, you know, there are so many people who are struggling and will struggle if we start to go down the line of let her rip and see what happens.
Russell?
Well, the PM, is it maybe 3 weeks ago, the 4-stage process was revealed, and which I think that was great, because it's actually going to it's preparing us for what's going to happen. There needs to be detail around the 4 stages, what that process actually looks like, which I know the Doherty Institute is looking into, so into the data. So at what point, at what point do we go from, we're in stage 1 now, at what point do we go into stage 2, then what point do we go into stage 3? At some point, we will be letting the virus in. That is what is going to happen. There's going to be enough people that are vaccinated, and as a result, it seems safe to let the virus in. And we have to prepare the country for that. People have to be aware that that is what is going to happen.
Minister, you wanted to say something a moment ago.
Yeah, look, it's really distressing just about the mental health issues, Libby. I'm really proud of you that you're sharing that with us.
Thank you.
But many people have had this problem. It is disrupting not just commerce, but people's lives. There's very lonely people who've been locked away for months during various lockdowns. The quickest way we can get out of this is to get that vaccine rollout, which will put a level of protection, turning a really serious illness into a mild illness. It's not a universal, absolute, only one type of solution. You know, with the influenza, we have drugs like Tamiflu, Relenza, as well as flu vaccines, and the same will happen with this illness. The whole world is looking at new drugs, whether it's fancy new ones or combination therapies with older drugs that have antiviral capability, like we treated HIV. It was untreatable for many years. When I was treating liver disease with Hep C, there was, first of all, just one drug, then two, and then all of a sudden we got combination therapy with multiple antivirals, and we've virtually can cure most people with Hep C. Same with TB. That principle will apply with this illness. So for everyone out there, the best thing we can do is get ourselves vaccinated, follow all the easy things that aren't drugs, like hand hygiene.
Sure.
Like when you're in crowded places, all that stuff.
And also, Minister, just to jump in there. Just to jump in, because I do want to get to some other questions because we're running out of time. There was a report on the ABC this morning about the government, the federal government, not acting fast enough to secure those drug treatments that will evolve now, as you're indicating, to now deal with what becomes an endemic disease, like the ones that you mentioned. So are you aware of, and do you want to see, real speed this time from your federal government to secure the drug treatments that will manage COVID-19 and its variants into the future?
Oh yes, definitely. Look,
and have you made any moves on that?
Week, look, we have a COVID evidence task force that is scanning the literature the whole time. I keep a track of it myself amongst my many duties. There are things evolving that will offer hope beyond just the vaccination, but the number one most important public health measure we've got now, until we can get effective treatments, and I'm getting reports all the time, really exciting results, which I'll follow, and the COVID Evidence Task Force will follow, and that is a next layer of defence against the virus. As you say, it's going to be endemic. That means it's going to float around all the time.